I've been asked to plant up this garden, so I thought I would go through the process of how many plants I needed to order, the thought process behind the plants that I am putting in, and just to show you how I end up putting them into the garden, because sometimes I change my mind about where I think they should go, and once you're in a place and you get to really understand it, it sometimes takes you longer than you think to decide on exactly what you want to put where. So what should you spend time on, and how do they actually end up going in? The other thing to remember is you don't actually have to plant it all up in one go, although if you've got a lot of planting to do, it might make sense financially to just buy in bulk from a commercial supplier. They may say that they're trade only, but what they basically mean by that is that you need to send them a list and order it. They don't want to be doing the sorts of things that most retail customers require, which is standing around and looking at stuff for ages. But if you know what you want to get and you order it, they deliver it, then you can, by all means, pretty much anyone will accept a non-trade customer if you act like you are trade, i.e. not being a pain in the arse customer. You can be a bit of a pain in the arse. You can't be like wandering around the shop and being like, oh, what's this one, what's this one? Anyway, you can do that afterwards when you need to fill in things, and remember that your garden is not static, so over time you'll see things that will flourish. You may want to edit things, and you may just be in a plant shop and you really want to buy a plant and you don't really have room for it, but that's never really a viable excuse. Anyway, I'll show you how I put these plants into the garden. You can see some of the selection here that I've got, as well as some bulbs that I'm going to put in just for a bit of extra spring colour, because it's a really cost-effective way of doing that. The basis of most of this is to just bring something that's more interesting closer to the front of the garden, and also into the middle, because that's where you're going to be looking. So it seems sometimes counterintuitive to people to think that they're blocking something up, but actually what you end up doing if you don't do that is you have nothing that's worth looking at in the middle of the garden. So adding some structure and some things that will change over the course of the year will give you something to focus on every time you look out of the window. You've got something that you want to look at and that reminds you of the time and the place that you're in. Having stuff in the middle also gives you the opportunity to build layers. So some things, if you have a look at one of the major things in lots of gardens, is that you put everything around the outside, and then it means that everything is stacked up against the fence, which means that you've just got almost like people lining up single file all around the outside, rather than things that have multiple layers and give you a sense of depth. So I've put this Stipa gigantea, which is a giant oak grass, so that will eventually be about this size, but you'll be able to see straight through it. And I've repeated that because it looks really effective as a repetition plant because of the golden colour it becomes in the summer. One might not expect to find a hippopotamus in a British garden, however. This one is quite happily and peacefully sat in the corner. And although it's nearly December, it's still a pretty good time to be planting because the soil hasn't cooled down. It's been a pretty warm year, and so it means that the plants aren't going to be stressed at all. They're going to need a lot less watering, and they've got all of the winter to be developing their roots, and they will be doing that as long as the temperatures are remaining at a fairly mild. It ends up being quite a good time to plant. The ideal time to plant for trees particularly is even advised to be end of October now, and that never used to be the case. It used to say September, because you put them in and the ground is still warm, so they start to develop their root system while they're not being too stressed because there's plenty of rain and it's not so hot that they're losing tons of water through the leaves. And this isn't a video about weeding, but obviously make sure that you're not planting into really weedy ground, because it's going to be really difficult to start clearing it once you've just packed in all of the plants that you've got. So take the time to prepare the ground, make sure that you've dug out any of the weeds. You'll never get rid of all the weeds, but you may as well have a go at getting rid of the ones that are there, because when you do dig them out, you end up turning over the soil, and then that brings any fresh seeds to the surface. If you can, then cover the ground with a plastic sheet or something if it's in the summer, and make sure you've killed off the bulk of the stuff that's there. There'll always be some weeding to do in between the plants you put in, so just expect that. But just because you can expect some doesn't mean that you should just have it absolutely full of weeds, because then it just becomes an impossible task to get around it, because it's much more difficult once you've got those plants in the way. Always in straight away whenever you dig a hole. This isn't some sick edging fetish content. I will get back to the garden and show you where to put them, but this is useful to do on paper a little bit first. We're not designing a whole garden, so you don't have to do a detailed survey where you triangulate stuff and make sure you know exactly where everything is precisely, because you're not doing any hard landscaping, so you may as well just get an idea of roughly what's going where. So I'm just going to show you here. I have roughly sketched out, that's that circle of the lawn in the middle, and then the layers here. So I might say, okay, I want that focal point definitely here, and I want to build some layers in, particularly around here, because that's where it's right in the middle of the garden, and so I want something pretty to look at as I look out the window. The other thing is, you're going to need to measure the total area of what you're actually going to be planting up. So if you were to, if you want to figure out what the area is of something, then get your tape measure out, probably one of those flexible tape measures, and figure out the areas of each thing. I tend to just work out either whether something is a triangle or roughly a rectangle. So a rectangle is going to be the width times the length, so that by that, and that is just half of the width times the length. So then this was just so that I knew roughly which structural plants I wanted to put where, and then because with shrubs you tend to use about 3 to 4 per square metre, and then with herbaceous plants, which are just soft ones that are going to be a bit smaller, that might vary a little bit. So you might be doing 4 or 5, and so that would mean that average, I could say, okay, I know that we got 37 square metres in total to plant up. So if I times 37 by 4, say if it was 40, then 160 is going to be the minimum sort of number of plants I would want if I want to have it fairly full looking as soon as I've planted it up. Wouldn't skip this step if it's the first time you've ever done it, because, and especially if there's more than one of you that's going to be involved with wanting to know what the result's going to be like. Because if you're doing it with your partner or whoever else you live with, or you want to enlist the help of a friend who knows what they're doing, it's going to be really useful to just have something, even if it's scruffy. It's going to be way easier to communicate it just by putting it down on paper. Just describing things as they exist in your head, you might think you've perfectly communicated them, but I guarantee you the other person has no idea what you're talking about. The reason why I think that there's such a dearth of videos about people describing how to select plants for an entire garden is that sometimes it's difficult to describe. If you know an area particularly well, you might know which plants work there. You might have seen a neighbouring garden or worked in it. You might live nearby and you might know which plants work well in that area. You might have seen particular displays when you've gone to botanical gardens and seen what the site aspect is like and what the soil's like. There's so many ways that you could be inspired to try something, but it's difficult to describe. The other reason why I think that you hardly ever see any of it is because it looks shit when you first put it in, or at least it doesn't look as good as it does after you've left it for several years. So documenting it becomes quite a challenge. That obviously doesn't account for the fact that they can be edited and changed as people's tastes and as people's tastes progress, but also as they see certain things that become available, or they just look at something, they see a space that they didn't envisage and they want to put something in it. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't feel that you have to get it right straight away, but also the best way of learning how to do it is to look at something else, be inspired by it and try it and see if it works, and start in an area that's fairly small. You don't have to try and take on a massive planting project as your first one. That would just be silly, because it's going to be quite challenging for you and a little bit overwhelming. And when you start to see the bills that are going to start to come in, it might be something that really makes the task a lot less enjoyable for you. So break it down, do it into smaller pieces and try that first. And also, if you've got tons of money, then just do the big one and fuck it. Who's that though? They're not watching my videos. And at this time of year, you can get some things either bare-rooted or rootballed. So this one is rootballed, and it comes in a Hessian sack, which will just break down as it's under the ground. So I'm just going to leave it in there and plant it with it. The one thing about this garden that would probably be improved as well is at least when it's the summer, is having some great big containers down this end, because there's such a big expansive patio here, which means that you don't get that sense of enclosure and coziness that you could get, because you're starting to get it from the trees and shrubs that are on the outside here. If you had a decent sized pot here and here, then and some substantial plants in it, then it's going to start to feel like this part is part of the whole garden. Clearly these are always just matters of interpretation, and I'm just saying them because I don't feel that people experiment with doing that if they're not experienced in gardening. They're actually quite basic things to try out, so there's no reason why you can't attempt them, and if you don't like them, at least you know you don't like them now, and you can be more sure in the position that you eventually take. One of the things that you get a lot better at from just doing these things is from handling the plants, seeing the plants, putting them in and knowing where you've put them. You'll quite quickly start to build up a repository of names and sizes, and once you've been doing it for several years, you'll have an intuitive feeling about what spacings you should use around different plants. If there's a plant that's actually going to get quite big, then you don't want to plant it at 3 per square metre, because if it takes up an entire square metre itself, then at some point that's going to be oversized and you're going to be a bit overplanted. There's not really any substitute for just starting to do it, have a go at it, because otherwise you'll never build up that experience. So don't convince yourself out of it prior to even starting. Got hat hair. E.H. Smith getting some free rep in here, but I've put a lot of bulbs are in these layers. You've got some alliums which stick up and have like that lollipop blue effect. So I've got those peppered in, so you'll see them as you're looking out the kitchen window. You'll see tons of colour in the early summer, late spring, all just going up through here. And to plant the bulbs, I just look at some areas where I want some colour at different times of year where it might be missing. And because the bulbs come up generally before the leaves are on the trees, there's more light at that time of year, and often more gaps where the perennials that I've just put in haven't filled up their space yet. So you can put them in the places that you think might be a little bit gappy earlier on in the year, or even in and around where you put the perennials, because they'll probably be up and finished before the perennials are really getting going. And the only thing that I do is just throw them on the ground so that they form a scattered and fairly random arrangement. And then my tool of choice for putting them in is just one of these. It's just got a hex shank on it, so you can put it into a normal drill. And then, yeah, I just find it much easier than a trowel, because you don't stab through existing stuff like bulbs, and it's a lot easier. You're allowing the battery to do a lot of the work and moving the stuff out of the way. So let's go have a look at the plants now that they've just been put in. So I've labelled them because it's pretty early still. So some of them, well obviously I've labelled some of the ones that you can see so that it's easier to start identifying the plants that you've got. But because they're not, some of them aren't substantial or even visible yet, it's actually really difficult to know, where the plants are when it comes to weeding, or you might decide that you see a plant at the nursery in the spring and you want to put it in somewhere and you can't remember where you put something, so you don't want to dig it up. But what we've got these 3 arbutus here, here and here for a little bit of rhythm, and something evergreen to help break up this line of the fence. There's a cherry here. We've got some shrubs like pyracantha and berberis, as well as this Sambucus black lace, which is the black elderflower, just to start to give some structure around the fence. This liquid ambar styraciflua, which is nothing at the moment, but it'll add some red tones to the autumn, where at the moment it's mainly yellow and orange. So it's nice to pop in some red, which is also going to be coming from these oak leaf hydrangeas that are here, and then you're going to get obviously tons of the bulbs that I put in, so loads of floral colour in the spring before lots of this has started to really get going. But what I would say is that often it looks a little bit underwhelming when you first put them in, because they haven't occupied the space that they're going to, and it's coming, it's nearly December now, so it's coming into the winter. So in order for it to look good at maturity, say in a year and a half, 2 years, it's going to look a little bit underwhelming up until that point. It's not going to look bad once they come on in the spring. It'll look really good, but it's going to be best after a period of time. And I think it's important to make that clear, that sometimes you can be doubting yourself, especially if you're inexperienced and you can really, really overplant something and buy way too many plants. And that's why it's best to just start with small areas and work on different bits as you go, because then you'll build up the experience to the point where you're confident and you would be able to do a massive area. If you're planning to plant up a massive garden, I would probably just enlist the help of somebody who knows what they're doing, because it's going to save you money in the long run, as well as giving you peace of mind, or at least get someone who knows what they're doing to help you. And what we have in there, see that label? That's Humulus lupulus aureus, which is golden hop, and it comes out, when it comes out, it'll grow up really quickly along this fence and then die back to nothing. But the acid green that it has against the red of this Sambucus black lace will look really, really great in the spring as it comes out. I've also put one over here because there's this post that's holding up the fence with no intention of the other neighbour actually sorting that post out. So at least that will cover up that ugly piece of timber during the summer. In the winter, you can't really see it behind these phormiums, so not too much of a problem. But certainly be better if you could walk up here and you don't see it, you just see masses of foliage. Obviously I can't transfer everything that I've got in my head to you over a 20-minute YouTube video, but I just wanted to give some sort of perspective as to how I think about things and how I actually implement them. This isn't going to look at its best, like I said in the video, for a little while. So after this video, I'll show you the follow-up when it exists. It doesn't exist yet, but if you're watching this and this is now 9 months old, then I'll leave the video here so that you can go to that afterwards. But I thought I would share with you some of the books that might be useful if you're thinking about creating your list of plants and how you can do your research behind the plants that you might want to use. Clearly you can do a lot of internet research, but the books are a little bit easier to just concentrate, not get taken down other odd rabbit holes that will distract you from what you're planning to do, is the main reason why I tend to use books anyway. Pete Udolph and Noel Kingsbury, who planted up the Lurie Garden in Chicago the High Line in New York, and it's all about how you're using perennials, i.e. not shrubs necessarily, for the structure and the colour. And you can actually see one of the plants that I used in here, which is a Stipa gigantea, where you can see these little golden spots which are where it's repeating, and that's one example of it there. They've used some heleniums here, but I was putting in some crocosmia for that similar type of red flecks next to lots of green as well as this golden colour. You'll go to your local charity shop if you want to. I'll leave some links for these in the description, for some Amazon links, which obviously I get paid for if you buy. Hopefully I gave you some value in this video, and I would love it if you repaid the favour. If you're going to buy these books anyway, then you bought them via the links. This one is an RHS wildlife gardening. If one of your priorities is attracting wildlife into your garden, or at least understanding a bit more about the wildlife that is in your garden, this is a great book, and it's got some plant suggestions in there. There's another RHS book called What Plant Where, but I can't find that at the moment. That's really useful for figuring out how much sunlight each of the plants are likely to need, the type of soil that they're likely to need. So if you've got clay soil, whether you've got loam soil. If you're wanting to know a little bit more about how you can properly plan and design your garden, this is a great starting point, and it does have quite a lot of plants in there that you might see in some particular schemes, and it might help you to narrow down your original long list. I tend to make a long list of the plants that I think could work, and then I work backwards. So I will send that off to lots of different suppliers to see whether I can source all of them. But you can probably find someone who will do some of the sourcing for you. If there's a commercial nursery, if you give them a long list, then they will be able to tell you whether they've got something, or they might offer a substitution. From there, then you can choose the plants that you're actually going to put in your short list, and just check roughly the numbers correspond to the area that you're going to be planting. I hope this has been insightful or useful or in some way into seeing how, if nothing else, it's part of the documentation of this particular garden, and it'll be great to see it next year. So I'll see you then, and well, I'll make some videos in between, but I'll see you then if this is the video that you came to the next one and you wanted to see how the garden developed. I'll see you then, which might be in a very short space of time. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes, hopefully. You really need to click that video. Go on, do it.